5.5 pounds. Act now and save $600 on the power of Toshiba.
Your satisfaction is guaranteed at Omnitech. My home phone number is on more than 130,000 invoices. Stop by our new downtown location.
A dramatic legacy that is truly Oregon. Unmistakable and increasingly under fire.
I could go out any night and kill 5 or 10 animals.
Widespread illegal hunting is an unseen threat to our wildlife heritage, a threat we can no longer ignore. I'm Grant McComey. Join us for a Channel 2 News Earth Agenda special, Bullets and Greed, Crimes Against Nature, Monday at 8:30 on KATU Channel 2.
Is society too sensitive or not sensitive enough? Tonight on Town Hall.
From ABC News. This week with David Brinkley. Now, from our Washington headquarters, here's David Brinkley.
Coming up, the big presidential primaries on Super Tuesday. Will Bush and Buchanan carry on their blood sport? Every day, Buchanan attacks a president who flatly refuses even to say his name, as if he didn't know how to pronounce it. Where is that going? For how long? Stay tuned. As for the Democrats, the field now seems to be down to 3, Clinton, Tsongas, and Brown. One of them is our guest today, Paul Tsongas, who became a candidate back in the days when President Bush, after the Gulf War, seemed unbeatable and nobody else wanted to take him on. And Richard Bond, a longtime Republican activist and now chairman of the Republican National Committee. Some background from our man Jack Smith, and a discussion here with George Will, Sam Donaldson, and Cokie Roberts, here on our Sunday program. First, a little news since the Sunday morning papers. In the last primaries and caucuses before Super Tuesday next week, President Bush won in South Carolina 67% to Pat Buchanan's 26%. David Duke bombed out with 7%. Governor Clinton was first in the Democratic primary with 63%, Paul Tsongas second with 19%. In the Arizona caucuses, Tsongas won with 34% to Governor Clinton's 29%, Jerry Brown 28%. In Wyoming, Clinton won with 29%, Jerry Brown 23%, and uncommitted, still in the race, 22%. Harkin 14%, Tsongas 12%. The New York Times reports that Governor Clinton, early in his tenure as governor, was in a business deal involving his wife and the owner of an Arkansas savings and loan. ABC's Chris Bury has a report.
The report surfaced just as Governor Clinton celebrated his big victory in the South Carolina primary. Today's New York Times raises questions about a real estate venture involving Governor Clinton, his wife Hillary, and the owner of an Arkansas savings and loan. In 1978, according to the Times, the Clintons entered a joint venture to develop Ozark vacation property with James McDougal, a former Clinton aide who owned a savings and loan. They formed a corporation, Whitewater Development. The article claims McDougal subsidized the corporation with money from his savings and loan, quote, ensuring that the Clintons were under little financial risk. As it turned out, the Clintons lost money and the corporation is no longer active. The deal raises questions, according to the Times, because after McDougal's savings and loan became insolvent and faced a possible shutdown by the state, Governor Clinton appointed a new state securities commissioner. The Times says the new commissioner then approved a plan to keep the business alive, a plan proposed by Clinton's wife Hillary, whose law firm had been hired to represent the savings and loan. The questions raised by the article are whether a governor should be involved in a venture with the owner of a business regulated by the state, and whether the governor's wife should get legal fees for work done for that business. Last night, Clinton was asked about his dealings with McDougal.
Well, I've known him for 25 years. In the late 70s, he asked my wife and I if we were interested in entering a land deal with him. We were in it. We never made any money out of it. We lost a lot of money in it. And we spent the last few years trying to get the records cleaned up, make sure at least they were in order.
According to the report, questions about the Clintons' involvement may be difficult to answer because accounts of what happened differ and because some records are missing. But some of those questions may dog Mr. Clinton as he campaigns across Texas today. Chris Bury, ABC News, Houston.
In the Gulf of Thailand, a ferryboat packed with tourists visiting a Buddhist shrine collided with an oil tanker, sank quickly with passengers trapped inside. Nobody knows how many. So far, 100 bodies have been recovered. We'll be back with all the rest of today's program in a moment.
This Week with David Brinkley, brought to you by GE. From aircraft engines to appliances, we bring good things to life. And by ADM, supermarket to the world.
But I could not believe it when I ate it. It was just, they're just absolutely wonderful.
I've learned to like them quite a bit. We take them home and eat them pretty regularly.
They were really delicious. I liked them.
They're just good.
Oh, they'd get a 10 for sure.
They're talking about it in the Midwest.
It's quick. I know it's nutritious. It's going to be good for me.
Bob has a high cholesterol problem, so they really solve a lot of problems for our whole family.
And soon it may be in the lips of people everywhere.
If he says it's good, it is really good.
Yeah, I like them.
It's the Midland Harvest brand Harvest Burger, an all-vegetable patty from the Archer Daniels Midland Company. Harvest Burgers are low in fat, low in calories, free of cholesterol, and contain dietary fiber. Qualities that are in growing demand by today's health-conscious consumers. And what are people saying about the taste? We couldn't have said it better ourselves. ADM, supermarket to the world.
6 months ago, it was thought we'd have very little or no contest for the presidency. Now we have contests, or at least exchanges of insults, in both parties. And only one candidate so far has dropped out, another is close to it, for the usual reasons, no votes and no money. This could go on until California's primary in June. In the meantime, on Tuesday, 11 states choose 882 delegates. Some background from Jack Smith in Miami. Jack?
David, any hope that the field of candidates would sort itself out early faded this week.
It's a little large, but the head's been expanding recently. Don't worry about it.
Not only is Pat Buchanan staying in, but among Democrats, the contest looks like being a long one as well.
For me, the fight simply is going to move on to new arenas.
Bob Kerrey dropped out after a poor showing in the early western states. His campaign was almost $1 million in debt. Tom Harkin, too, is out of cash and almost out of the race, but Jerry Brown had a surprise victory in Colorado.
I'm running against a corrupt status quo.
It gives him a big boost, but where does he go from here? Increasingly, among Democrats, it's settling into a two-man race between Bill Clinton, who this week decisively won the Georgia and South Carolina primaries, and Paul Tsongas, whose victories in the Maryland and Utah primaries and the Washington state caucuses show he can win outside New England. The next round of contests is here in the South in 2 days' time on Super Tuesday. It was designed to narrow the field and produce a nominee for the Democrats, but it probably won't work that way this year.
And I want to tell you something. It's good to be back in Florida.
The South is Clinton's home ground, and he has the edge here in money, organization, and support.
I'm going to go with Clinton. I think that we can elect him and get the Republicans out.
Clinton is attacking Tsongas as a backer of Republican-style trickle-down economics.
Growth first, fairness later. Bull, we never had growth without fairness, and we never will.
And this week, at the Dallas debate, moderated by ABC's Peter Jennings, Clinton defended his support for a tax cut for the middle class.
To say that this middle-class tax cut, number one, is the center of anybody's economic package is wrong. And number two...
A lot of people have that impression, I'm sure you know.
Yeah, thanks to his ad, which is false.
Tsongas has shown mounting annoyance with Clinton, and this weekend took off the gloves, accusing Clinton of being unprincipled and pandering to voters.
This is my opponent, Panda Bear.
Tsongas is fighting an uphill battle in a region where his pro-business message may not sell.
You're not going to persuade the average Southern Democrat that Wall Street is going to make them well, because they have been persuaded for at least 6 or 7 generations that what Wall Street does is make them sick.
Nevertheless, in the South, Tsongas is making inroads, even if voters can't always pronounce his name.
On the Democratic side, I would say Mr. Tsongas is probably the closest to what I think.
Tsongas, that is, now threatens Clinton in Florida, the least southern of the southern states.
He's caught on with the kind of people who don't need organizations to get them out. The suburban, well-educated, in many cases the foreign car driving yuppie.
And those are Tsongas voters. So Democrats look like they're locked in a fight that could last well into the spring. And the same is true of Republicans. Little chance of a knockout blow there either.
We have done it again.
Buchanan is showing a fairly consistent knack for getting about a third of the GOP vote, even in states where he hasn't campaigned, and there's no let-up in his jabs at the president.
Mr. Bush is in danger of becoming the Jimmy Carter of the Republican Party.
Is merit there?
The president's campaign chairman in Florida, his son Jeb, says he's not concerned by Buchanan's staying power.
It doesn't bother you? No, I don't. As long as he doesn't, I don't like people attacking my dad personally. But he is one of a long list of people that do that. So, you know, join the fray.
But there's mounting evidence the White House is rattled. This week, for instance, the president backtracked on his 1990 budget deal with Congress, apologizing for it and calling it a mistake.
And given all of that, yes, a mistake.
Mr. Bush had, till this week, defended the budget deal. The New York Times called him President Noodle, and some think he's got problems.
Buchanan's got a message, and he's going to keep delivering that message. And I think Republicans have to be concerned that the president's bleeding very, very, very slowly. And how long is this going to last?
What the pundits were confidently predicting just a few months ago would be a short, dull run for the White House is now turning into a long, tough campaign for both the incumbent and the would-be challengers. David?
Jack, thank you. Coming next, Richard Bond, a Republican Party activist and who is now chairman of the Republican National Committee, and shortly the surprise candidate of 1992, Paul Tsongas. In a moment.
Imagine your refrigerator with bigger door shelves for bigger bottles, with leftovers left in quick-serve trays for leftover space. More space, nearly 27 cubic feet, and a door in the door for things you use more. Imagine GE's Space Center 27.
8 years ago, BMW started a driving school in America.
The better a car feels to you, the better a car is engineered.
For BMW, a natural extension of an inherent belief.
The better driver you become.
That's quite a feeling to be able to go around a corner like that.
A belief that a well-engineered automobile should do more than simply improve the driver's image.
And I felt like I had control of the car instead of the car having control of me.
A better driver. The ultimate goal of the ultimate driving machine.
Advertising experts tell us that only one single point can be driven home in an ad. And the one point that the people at the Archer Daniels Midland Company want to make is that by putting gasoline containing 10% ethanol in your tank, you'll reduce carbon monoxide emissions by up to 25%. So remember, 10% in gets up to 25% out. It appears we have a little more time, so I'll add that ethanol is derived from surplus cornstarch, a renewable domestic resource. And ethanol burns cleaner because it contains 34% oxygen, the highest oxygen level available in a fuel additive. But what we want you to remember is that 10% ethanol in gets up to 25% carbon monoxide out. 10% in gets up to 25% out. And that's a point about cars and gasoline that's well worth driving home. ADM, supermarket to the world.
6 men want to live in this house for the next 4 years. There's only room for one. Tuesday, Americans from 11 states help decide. Will the Democrats have a front-runner? Can Bush shake Buchanan? Make sense of it all. Join Peter Jennings, David Brinkley, and the people of ABC News, Super Tuesday at 10, 9 Central.
Mr. Bond, thank you for coming.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're glad to have you with us. Here in the studio are George Will and Sam Donaldson, both of ABC News. Now, we've all been following your handiwork, or at least we're following the campaigns, and will continue to. How do you account for one thing? How do you account for so many people voting for uncommitted, which means voting essentially for nobody?
Well, there's a protest vote out there. I think there's a protest vote out there, and we're comfortable with that. We're glad that people have an opportunity to voice their concerns. I think Pat Buchanan, in that respect, has done us a favor, because it's a good vehicle for people to get this out of their system now, register their message with the president, and come home to him in the fall.
He's got the message, and is he going to respond to it? And if so, how?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that he's got the message, and he had the message long before these results started to come in. He's given the Congress a challenge to pass a short-term economic recovery package within 100 days. There are 12 days left on that deadline, and the Democrats are so far bringing us a tax increase. The House and Senate are currently arguing about how high that tax increase is going to be. I think that puts the president back on the political high ground when he vetoes the Democrats' tax increase and again challenges America to say, folks, let's pick one way. Let's pick my way or let's pick the Democrats' way, but you can't have both ways anymore.
Well, Mr. Bond, your critics, who not surprisingly are critical, say that both of these tax plans are nickel and dime, don't amount to anything, and would have no effect on a recession. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think that what you've got to look at is the fact that the consumers out there are worried, they're discontented, they're spooked in a way, and they need to see their government pull together and give them something back for their tax dollars. Right now, the voters out there are just estranged from government as a whole. And if they're going to see the Congress go ahead and say that the answer to the economic problems right now is to raise taxes, I think that's going to ring very hollow with all Americans.
Mr. Bond, I'd like to give you a chance to clarify the president's thinking on three subjects: taxes, the arts, and negative campaigning. First with taxes. This week the president said he's rather sorry he went in for the tax increase when he did. He has, however, defended it as a good thing. And indeed, as I understand it, Mr. Brady and Mr. Darman, his principal economic advisors, still defend it. And the president said, when explaining why he was recanting, he said it's the flack he got for it, which suggests that it's only the political reaction, not the fact itself. Can you tell us what he really thinks about this and if he agrees with Darman and Brady?
Well, I have talked to the president about this and think he feels very strongly about what happened was a mistake. And the reason it was a mistake is not because they tried to put some level of discipline in congressional spending. That was not the mistake. The mistake was in trusting the Democrats in Congress to adhere to that discipline. And the president, in an act of political courage, walked the gangplank on taxes, and a whole lot of Republicans walked that gangplank with him, and it cost them terribly politically. And it didn't do anything for the country. It didn't do anything for the country because the Democrats wouldn't cooperate and stick to the spending caps and stick to the disciplines that were put in there. That's why it was a mistake.
Mr. Buchanan has been criticized for some of the ads he ran down south pertaining to government support for the arts. I know that you're familiar with these ads. Can you tell me where precisely President Bush differs with Mr. Buchanan in what Mr. Buchanan's saying about subsidizing the arts?
Well, I watched your program a couple of weeks ago, George and David, and you all reluctantly concluded as well that the government really didn't belong in the arts funding basis. And I think that that is basically a thrust of what Pat Buchanan is saying. It's very tough to say what is art and what is not art, and perhaps we ought to get out of that business. I think what the president is objecting to and what the problem is now is not the subject of the arts as much as it's the low-road campaign that Pat has gone down ever since he's been in the South, with increasing from xenophobia and isolationism to race baiting, and we're just not comfortable with that.
So you're saying that the president is now for getting the government out of the subsidizing of the arts?
No, I didn't say that. I said I think that was the thrust of the argument at this point. The president will have to make a statement on that one way or the other. I kind of agree with you folks about 2 weeks ago when you all concluded that the government ought to be out of the funding of the arts. I know Pat Buchanan feels that way about it.
The president has expressed some dismay about what he considers negative campaigning, and you have also. The president, of course, won the New Hampshire primary, many people believe, in 1988 by attacking Senator Dole as Senator Straddle. That's a direct attack, one Republican on another. Has he changed his standards?
Well, it's not a standards change. I think you've got to look at what kind of appeal that Pat Buchanan is presenting right now to the American people and the effect that has on the Republican Party. And I, as chairman, have got to comment on that. It's one thing to criticize a fellow Republican for their stand on taxes. It's another thing to go down the low road of race baiting and divisiveness. I think George Bush's message is a message of hope and opportunity. I think Pat Buchanan's message is degenerating into a message of anger and hate.
Mr. Bond, you said a moment ago that it would come down to the Democrats' way or the president's way this fall. Yet one of the Democrats, who arguably could be the nominee, Paul Tsongas, sounds a lot like the president's way when it comes to economics. He's for a capital gains tax cut. He's for other matters, which some people say make him really a Republican. So what's the case against Tsongas? Should he be the nominee?
Well, I think the case against Senator Tsongas, who, by the way, I have an awful lot of respect for and who's run a brilliant campaign so far, is that you can't have just half that loaf. Senator Tsongas goes far, far hard left on a number of social programs that the Republican Party and the American people are just not comfortable with. So it's one thing to sound like a Republican up in New Hampshire or on the economy, but there's a whole totality of issues that the American people are sensitive to in presidential campaigns, and I think that Senator Tsongas leaves their concerns behind as he drifts into the left on those issues.
That may be, but I ask you about the economic case. Assuming that the recession, whether we're still in it or whether we're coming out of it, is going to be the determining factor this fall, what's the economic case against Paul Tsongas?
Well, I think Senator Tsongas in the Senate has a number of sins as far as Republicans would be concerned in terms of his spending and tax policies, as you have to examine his record. His record hasn't been very much on display yet in this campaign because, for the most part, until New Hampshire, the Democrats really didn't go after him, and they're not going after him now in his economic proposals for the most part because they're going after him on some of his social proposals.
Would he be the toughest person to run against, or would Bill Clinton, Governor Clinton, be the toughest opponent?
Oh, I still like Jerry Brown in there, too. Remember that Lloyd Bentsen is fond of saying that if Jerry Brown is the answer, it must be an awfully weird question. So let's not forget him.
All right, we won't forget him. Mr. Bond, when should Pat Buchanan, in your judgment, drop out of the race?
I think he ought to drop out at the time that he's mathematically eliminated. I respect Pat's right to run, but I think when you come to the point in time when you're mathematically eliminated, which will take place sometime in May, I think sometime in May, that he ought to drop this quest.
Now, will you allow him to speak, address the Republican National Convention?
Well, I think that's something we have to talk about with Pat and with others down the line. The party rules, it bears mentioning now that the party rules established since 1972 indicate that to have your name placed in nomination at the convention, you've got to have the majority of 5 state delegations. That is, you've got to win 5 states. Now, I don't think Pat's going to win 5 states, so that subject is going to be up for discussion.
It's your decision, as I understand it, whether he will be able to address the convention, absent what you just said. Well, are you going to allow him to speak? Are you going to shut him out?
I've got an open mind on that question right now. No decisions have been made.
You said a moment ago in a question earlier on, you said that Pat Buchanan is taking a race-baiting, hate-filled road. Now, why would you want someone like that addressing the Republican convention? And can you justify that? Tell us where you think he's taking doing race-baiting.
Well, I am very uncomfortable in particular with a comment that Pat Buchanan made the other day in Georgia at a rally where there were some Jewish protesters, and Pat Buchanan looked over them and kind of sneered and said, this rally is for Americans only and for the good old USA. Now, his people later on have explained he meant nothing by that. I question that. I question whether or not Pat was deliberately trying to antagonize those Jewish demonstrators by implying that they weren't Americans. I am just very, very uncomfortable with that and think that that is not the face of the Republican Party that we want to have. So I'm simply pointing out as Republican Party chairman, clean up the language a little bit. I think that there are some very good parts of Pat Buchanan's message, particularly as it relates to government, the size of government, and the ineffectiveness of government. But if he's going to basically hijack David Duke's message on race and religious tolerance and put a jacket and tie on it and try to clean it up, I'm just not comfortable with that.
Mr. Bond, thank you. Thanks very much for coming. Pleased to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Coming next, former Senator Paul Tsongas. In a moment.
Every 7 seconds of every day, someone is going somewhere with GE because over 200 of the world's airlines rely on the power of GE jet engines.
Tokyo and Kokomo and Marrakesh and Budapest and Sydney, Monte Carlo, San Diego, Santiago, Barcelona, Arizona, Bora Bora, Glacabora, and Siena, and Vienna, and New York and County Cork. GE in the air, we'll be there.
And since every year more and more people are going to more and more places, GE has developed the jet engine of the future, the GE90. More powerful, more fuel efficient, cleaner, and quieter than any jet engine ever made.
Petersburg and Uruguay and Malibu and Paraguay and Rome and Santa Fe and Cincinnati and LA, and there is Canada and Malaga and Rimini and Brindisi, New Delhi, Kansas City, and a town without a penny. GE in the air, we'll be there.
Coming every 7 seconds to an airport near you.
This Week with David Brinkley will continue in a moment.
Monday, how did an experiment change their minds about drinking?
Then has he found the secret to selling American cars? Plus Gina Davis on Good Morning America Monday. Bankruptcy. It can ruin your life.
I wasn't making enough money to pay my bills. Getting further behind and my creditors were on me. Almost filed bankruptcy. But I heard it would stay on my credit record for 10 years. It would be tough to buy things on credit.
Consumer Credit Counseling Service, the best alternative to bankruptcy.
They solve debt problems by working with your creditors to avoid bankruptcy.
Call Consumer Credit Counseling Service today.
I'm glad I did.
Tonight on Town Hall.
It's unfortunate that the teams were ever called Redskin. I don't think that's a very complimentary name.
The sports names ought to stay. They're a tradition in our country.
I think society's become a bunch of crybabies.
Native Americans say they are insulted by team nicknames. The Oregonian decided not to print certain names. Critics say people are overreacting. Are we too sensitive or not sensitive enough? Thin Skins, tonight at 6 on Town Hall.
Join Steve Dunn for Channel 2 News, Sundays at 5 and 11.
Mr. Tsongas, thank you for coming.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're pleased to have you with us. We had a man, maybe you saw a minute ago, we had a man here who referred to you as Mr. Tongas. Does that bother you that people don't know how to pronounce your name?
Let me tell you, David, if my name was Smith, I would not have been elected to the Senate. The ad we used in 1978 were people mispronouncing my name. And the last one was a little child who called me Tickets. And I've forever been known as Tickets in Massachusetts, so I accept it as it comes.
Well, it seems not to have hurt you.
His ticket was punched in Massachusetts that year.
And now...
I would tell you that the Senate president in Massachusetts, who's a dear friend of mine, still calls me Zongas. And once people get the wrong pronunciation in their heads, it's like cannot come off. So it's I've learned to live with that.
So long as they vote right, you don't care, do you?
That's exactly right.
All right. Well, I want to ask you this. When you were in the Senate, your voting record was very little different from that of Senator Kennedy, who was a model M1 perfect liberal Democrat. You have changed since then. What changed you?
Well, if you go back and read the book that I wrote in 1981 called The Road from Here, I was making exactly the same arguments in that book, that the Democrats have to be pro-economic growth, have to reach out to the business community. And basically took very much the same positions that are in this recent book, A Call to Economic Arms. But the fact is, on social issues, and I think Mr. Bond was correct, I am a liberal. I make no apologies for that. And obviously that's where they're going to come after me after the nomination.
Well, some Democrats are very uncomfortable with you because they feel your views are more like those of a Republican.
Well,
are you going to, because of your success, do you think the party might change its spots a little bit?
It has to. I mean, the fact is that the old ideology, if you look back on presidential races, we've lost, we won, then we lost. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that that is a losing track. And the fact is that I can appeal to independents and to thoughtful Republicans. I mean, I won the Washington caucuses and I won Arizona yesterday because Republicans could walk in and vote for me. So it seems to me if you're going to beat George Bush, the question is who is the strongest candidate who can reach beyond the Democratic core? And I think a pro-economic growth message has resonance. If you look, for example, at the endorsements that came out today, this is the first time in my life that I've been in Tennessee, and yet I was endorsed this morning by the Tennessean because of the economic message.
The newspaper in Nashville.
That's right. And the St. Petersburg Times this morning, the Tampa Tribune, newspapers in Texas, because of the message. You know, I acknowledge that I don't have the endorsements or the money that Bill Clinton has in the Democratic Party, but I think ultimately messages have power, have a capacity to travel.
Senator, this week you landed on Mr. Clinton, calling him a panda bear who's cynical, unprincipled, and will say anything to get elected. And what provoked you was his endorsement of an electric boat project, the Seawolf submarine, that's important to both Rhode Island and Connecticut, where upcoming primaries are. Long introduction to the following question. Primaries are coming up in Michigan and in Florida, and I want to give you a chance to offend somebody if you're of that mind. First of all, in Florida, of course, there's a large Jewish vote. Tell us what you think about the West Bank. Do Israelis have a right to live and settle on the West Bank?
Yes, they do. The fact is that, if I could get into it for a moment, that there's a pamphlet being distributed today in Florida questioning my support of Israel. Now, Bill Layman, who's the congressman from South Florida, endorsed me yesterday. He's about as staunch a supporter of Israel as anybody. Now, let me give you an example of what's going on. The pamphlet says, it quotes a vote of mine back a number of years ago during the Carter administration, where I voted not to cut off aid to Syria. And so that is given out as an impression to be given that I support Syria. What is not being told by the Clinton people is that 6 out of the 7 Jews in the Senate voted with me. It was an attempt to reach out to Syria during that period of time when they were being more reasonable. That's the kind of thing that's going on, and I object to it.
Who put out the pamphlet? Do you know?
The Clinton people. It was given to me by a newspaper reporter yesterday.
Now, passing on, I mean, some people would say that you have just pandered, would they not, to the Jewish vote?
No, when I disagreed with Israel, I said so. Remember back in 1982, when Israel went into Lebanon, I had no objection because they were being bombed by going into Lebanon and making a security zone. What I objected to and spoke out against was going into Beirut. Now, I was in Beirut during the bombing. I saw it. I was the only senator who was in there, and I saw what was going on, and I spoke out against it.
Let's move on.
I'm a strong supporter of Israel's survival and have voted that way.
Let's move on.
But I'm not someone, I think you know my modus operandi. If I agree, then I'm supportive. If there are issues I disagree with someone on, I'm going to say so.
Let's move on to Michigan, where Senator Regal of Michigan in the Finance Committee got into the bill a measure that would reclassify many Japanese minivans as trucks instead of cars. This would have the consequence of increasing the tariff from, I guess, 2.5% to 25%, a substantial protectionist measure, and doubtless very popular in the state of Michigan. Opponents say, look, these minivans haul kids, not concrete, they're cars. You're a free trader. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I would probably look askance at it, but as I understand the issue, and again, I don't pretend to be an expert, that as I understand what was told to me some days ago was that the Japanese, in essence, have had it both ways. That it was classified one way when it first came in and then classified a different way. So they've ended up with the best of both worlds. Again, I don't pretend to be an expert, but I think there should be some even-handed policy here. But I don't end up with the kind of policies that are suggested. It seems to me the way you beat the Japanese ultimately is simply build a better automobile.
One question on the subject that George raised concerning Israeli settlements on the West Bank and Gaza. Do you agree with the administration that Israel should not receive the $10 billion loan guarantees from the United States unless she agrees to halt building settlements there?
Sam, I was in the United States Senate when Jackson Vanik was the cornerstone of our relationship with the Soviet Union. Basically, what we said to the Soviets was, if you do not allow the Jews to emigrate, you have no viable relationship with the United States. Now you have a changed Soviet structure. They're allowing the Jews to emigrate. So the loan guarantees, I think, are essential to that. Now, the settlements are going to have to be an issue that's going to be talked about. I mean, at some point, there has to be resolution of that. My difficulty with what's going on now in the discussions, I don't believe they're going to work. What I have called for, if I can just do it in 10 quick seconds.
You can take whatever time you need as long as you eventually, if you will, sir, answer the question that I ask.
What I'm calling for is a Middle Eastern common market where you take the two entities and lock them together in economic terms. And then they can negotiate on the issue of the settlement, because then they have a self-interest in each other, which at this point, you have entities that are out here. All you do is change one leader and it falls apart.
Well, does that mean...
I do not support the administration's position that they should stop the settlements at this point. I think the settlements are going to be a problem, but they have to be negotiated between the parties and not imposed upon by the United States.
So you would
I
extend the $10 billion loan guarantees and not require Israel to stop the settlements?
That's right, but I would also put in motion, day one, the economic common market in the Middle East to force these countries together economically.
Okay, you say that the Bush administration this fall, if you're the nominee, will run against you on your social issues and your record there. So let me ask you about...
I do the same thing if I were them.
Well, you think it's effective, do you?
Of it.
You think it would be effective?
I think...
Let me just bring up the one that I had in mind, gay rights.
Okay.
You vociferously say you are for gay rights. What gay rights are you for, and are there any so-called gay rights that you oppose?
Well, my view, I filed the gay rights bill a long time ago. There was no political advantage to doing that. But I am adamant in my view that we have to be one people, a healed people. And if we're talking about being Americans, my view, as I say on the stump, everybody's in, nobody's out. And that includes whether you talk about race or sexual orientation, whatever. Everybody's going to be part of this race. We are competing with the Japanese and the Germans. And to the extent you exclude anybody who has merit and can contribute, then you simply have a lesser country. So on individual rights, on women's rights, on civil rights, on human rights, I'm adamantly and aggressively pro-inclusionary.
All right, so
environmental issues, etc.
You're for gay people marrying openly, not having any restrictions from the standpoint of the law or social conscience?
Well, I don't know what you mean by social conscience. The fact is, people who are gay are gay.
Well, many churches, for instance, oppose marriage between people of the same sex. And I was including that when I talked about social conscience.
Yeah. Well, I guess I disagree. The fact is that people who are gay, and they have to live their lives as well. And somehow to say that they're not Americans is not equal to anybody else. I mean, you have all these people who have been identified as being gay, who are major contributors in the United States. And it seems to me that to the extent you exclude anybody from Americana, you simply have a lesser country. And I'm not going to back down on those kinds of commitments.
Now, you say that Governor Bill Clinton is unprincipled. What do you mean unprincipled?
Well, that Seawolf issue really, drove me over the edge. The Seawolf, as you know, is a submarine that is designed to go after Soviet subs in the North Atlantic. Well, those subs are not being built by the Soviets anymore. And so when Bill Clinton came up for the submarines in the debate, I mean, it just did not fit given what's going on with the end of the Cold War, all of that kind of thing. Well, it's pretty obvious what happened.
Well,
and that is that
if I may, Senator, you may argue that you've used the word pandering. You may argue that if you want, but what is unprincipled about saying I advocate a submarine program?
Because in this particular case, it's not just you're pandering to the votes in Connecticut and Rhode Island, and a sub that the administration is opposed to and rescinded the money for, but Bill Clinton knows, as I know, that with George Bush opposed to building more of these submarines, they're never going to be built. So in essence, giving the people in Connecticut and Rhode Island the hope that if he becomes president, somehow magically, despite the Congress, that this submarine is going to be built is cruel. You're talking about people's lives, their capacity to provide for their children, and to give these people this false hope. That's not just pandering. I mean, I object to that. I mean, argue with me on the middle-class tax cut, argue with me on these other issues, but that crosses the line. That goes beyond pandering. That's a matter of principle.
Senator, let's talk for a moment about the crass subject of delegates. Some people feel that once someone gets to 40, 41, 42% of the delegates needed to nominate, a snowball effect will develop. And they say that the so-called superdelegates, party leaders, some members of Congress, governors, elected Democrats, are really there as superdelegates to make the snowball roll, to bring the process to closure. Among superdelegates, Mr. Clinton seems to have a considerable advantage. Do you dispute that, and what conclusion do you draw from that?
Well, I think you're exactly right. The fact is that the party apparatus, I'm the agent of change. I'm trying to bring in new economics to the Democratic Party. And the fact is, it's really the machine against the message. And the fact is that most of the Democratic governors, senators, members of Congress are with Bill Clinton. Doesn't mean that they believe that he has the better message. They don't. But look at all these endorsements and editorial endorsements. I think I can make the best case against George Bush. And ultimately what I'm going to say to these superdelegates is, who do you want to be your candidate? Someone who can appeal to independents and Republicans as well, or someone that you are more comfortable with, because indeed Bill's politics and his policies are very democratic in the traditional sense. So I, as an agent of change, do have that difficulty, and I acknowledge that.
I just have another question, Senator. Do you think Bill Clinton, Governor Clinton, is electable? And if you say he's electable, how can a man who's unprincipled be electable?
Well, I mean, there's just been too many issues come out. I think there are two factors. One,
is he electable?
I don't think so. I do not.
You don't
not
think
as electable. Let me revise that. The question in my mind, who is more electable against George Bush? And I believe that I am. Whether he is electable against George Bush you know, who knows what happens down the road.
Well, can an unprincipled person be elected? I suppose in our history it's happened, but I mean...
Sam, of all the people...
You understand the question, Senator. How can you, during these primaries, go after each other hammer and tong? You've called him unprincipled, cynical. You say that he's a race baiter. How can a person like that be elected?
No, I did not call him a race baiter. I objected to his reference to me as not American in my economic policies. But let me tell you that this has not been a very pleasant campaign. You know, once I won in New Hampshire, it became very negative. And I have called repeatedly to all the candidates, let's stop. And I've tried to get them out to take the pledge. No more negative campaigning. Let's go on our issues. For me, this particular approach is harmful because I have a message. And to the extent I am forced into response, I'm off my message, and that hurts me.
George, we've got a few seconds.
Yeah, very briefly, one of the negative things Mr. Clinton's been saying about you is that you said something sinful when you said you would be the best candidate that Wall Street ever had. Now, some people hear that and they say, well, that just means the stocks and bonds are going to go up and that's a good thing. Can you unpack the meaning behind that sinful statement?
Well, you know what's ironic about that statement is that Bill's been raising money in Wall Street for months. I finally had my first fundraiser in Wall Street about 4 days ago, and it was done by a Greek restaurant owner. So I'm hardly the candidate of Wall Street. What I said was to American business, I'm going to be your best friend because I'm going to make you profitable. That's the good news. The bad news is I'm going to hold you to a much higher standard of corporate giving, social responsibility, environmental protection, that kind of thing. And that's the fact, but obviously that's not going to be in a Bill Clinton ad.
Mr. Tsongas, thank you. Our time is up. Thanks very much for being with us. Been a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Coming next, our discussion here, and nobody knows what that'll be about in a moment.
GE 2800 dishwasher. It does almost everything but clear the table.
GE, we bring good things to life.
To you, this may be just a bushel of corn. But to us at the Archer Daniels Midland Company, it's enough pure golden corn oil to make 2 pounds of margarine. It's also enough protein meal to raise 3 chickens. We even capture the surplus heat generated during processing and use it to accelerate the hydroponic growth of fresh vegetables. From what's left, we distilled 2.5 gallons of ethanol, used to make cleaner burning high-octane gasoline to help improve the environment. So you see, we get both food and fuel from each bushel of corn. One more reason why ADM is known as Supermarket to the World.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lisa. Happy birthday to you.
Sunday, Cobra, Viper, Python. Powerful and deadly.
This is a snake of almost mythological proportions.
Realm of the Serpent on ABC's World of Discovery Sunday.
And joining us will be Cokie Roberts of ABC News. I forgot to say that, Cokie.
Oh, dear.
You're here. Okay, fine.
Yes, here I am.
All right, you want to hear a little more about politics. When should Pat Buchanan drop out, if he should? George, what do you think?
Well, he drops out when, by the rationale of his campaign, it's no longer working. But the question is he running to get nominated? I think not. Is he running to hold up a flag that will become identified with him so that he can be the inheritor of the conservative cause in '96? I think that's why he's running. Therefore, there's no reason why he should stop until he goes right through California.
Well, there is an argument, though, George. I mean, Buchanan has become the General Jubilee T. Cornpone of this campaign. You go from defeat to
Jubilation
defeat.
Jubilation.
Well, I gave him even higher Jubilee.
Give him the correct title. That's a Broadway play by Al Cap.
That was a lot of fun. But he goes from defeat to defeat to defeat, and it's clear he's not going to be the nominee, and it's clear he's not going to blood George Bush any more than he has from the standpoint of demonstrating what others have said. Bush runs against uncommitted, and 30% of the vote is against him in the Republican primaries. Bush is going to be the nominee. But if Buchanan keeps on and keeps on, he gives the Democrats ammunition. In the fall, they run the Buchanan ads. They run Pat Buchanan on the stump.
And he has been rough. He really has been rough. Much rougher than any of the Democrats have been towards each other.
Well, all his life, Cokie. That's Pat Buchanan's M.O.
I thought it was interesting, though, that Rich Bond, the Republican chairman, said that he should get out when it's numerically impossible for him to win. And the Republicans are much smarter about that than the Democrats are. Most of their primaries are winner-take-all primaries, so that even if Pat Buchanan is getting 30% of the vote here, 30% of the vote there, he's not getting any delegates. And soon, very soon, the president will have enough delegates in another month or two that he will have the nomination. The Democrats, on the other hand, have now rules that make it harder and harder and harder to get to the point where somebody has the majority of delegates, so that they can get all the way to the convention without knowing who that person is.
Sort of a stress test.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to do Mr. Buchanan any good 4 years from now, because the more you see of Pat Buchanan, the more you see of this rough side, and the more you understand his views on other issues than the economy. And I think he's not David Duke, but I think he's closer to David Duke than the mainstream of the Republican Party, and in 96 he's not going to be nominated.
If Pat were primarily motivated by a visceral concern for the Republican Party, then he would probably get out soon. But Mr. Buchanan is primarily a movement conservative. That is, he identifies with groups and individuals and institutions and events outside the Republican Party, and therefore I think appeals to his loyalty to the Republican Party are
as
one
of the leading conservatives, does the movement conservative identify with Pat Buchanan?
I think to a large extent they do. They agree with a lot of what he says, but they disagree with George Bush. So there's a great sense that Mr. Buchanan's carrying their water even when they don't agree with him.
Well, he might have also done the Republican Party a great service in that David Duke went nowhere in South Carolina yesterday.
7% of the vote.
And Pat Buchanan has shown that the protest votes will go pretty much anywhere. What you had with David Duke in Louisiana was an enormous protest vote, and those protesters are willing to pull any protest lever. It was not so strongly David Duke. It was much more the question of not liking the way things are.
Imagine if David Duke were getting 25, 30%
That's right.
of the vote
And he could be.
Primaries.
And he could be, because what we've learned is uncommitted gets 25, 30% of the vote against George Bush at this point. Nobody.
I think the most important question for Buchanan to consider is not whether he can run and win the nomination in 96, but whether John Sununu will give up his spot on Crossfire on CNN. He's now got, and Buchanan can get back to making a living.
I didn't hear it. I read this somewhere, that when Sununu first appeared on that program, he was told, "Welcome to our profession." Sununu said, "I feel slimy already."
He did.
Is that correct?
Well, he wasn't on the program, but he said, "Yeah, I feel slimy already." But somehow John Sununu could overcome his aversion on the day they gave him his paycheck. He managed to go down to the bank with it, slimy feeling or not. Welcome to the business,
Slithering
John.
all the way, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Principles sometimes
we have an
give
interesting
way.
situation here. We have Paul Tsongas pushing the Democratic Party to the right, or trying to, and Buchanan pushing the Republican Party to the right, or trying to. Is this some kind of watershed in American politics?
Well, it's not a good year for liberals, clearly. Tom Harkin is
bombed
out, and is likely to pull out very shortly. But it is also not a good year for Washington, and I think that's a lot of what we're seeing, that Pat Buchanan, the ultimate Washington insider, born and bred, is preaching against Washington. The senators on the Democratic side have both gone nowhere. Jerry Brown's message, even given the messenger, is taking off in some areas. I mean, it shows that all of those who preached that maybe a Benson or a Gore should have gotten into this race, or a Gebhardt, were probably wrong.
The Spin of the Year prize goes to a Harkin staffer who's, I guess, after Harkin carried Iowa and I guess won the Minnesota caucuses and did well in Idaho. He said, our candidate, Harkin, is the landmass winner. That he's covered more territory, which I really thought was an imaginative reach.
But ground rather than votes.
That's right. But, you know, Senator Tsongas is clearly trying to say, I'm not a conservative. Look at these social issues. Look at gay rights and all the rest. Mark my words, and this is hardly a blazing sunburst of insight, if he should be nominated, the fall campaign will find Mr. Bush sounding very like Mr. Buchanan because he will be talking a lot about gay rights and it won't be flattering.
Well, as one of the few people perhaps in our business who has interviewed Willie Horton, I went up to the state pen in Baltimore a couple of years ago and actually interviewed him. I don't doubt that George Bush this fall, if he needs to, will roll him out again or whatever he needs. But may I argue against the fact that you say Harkin didn't do well, so liberalism isn't doing well. Harkin is a messenger, and I believe that the messenger is at least as important, and perhaps more so, than the message. I give you Ronald Reagan, I give you a lot of other people.
How do you explain Tsongas?
Yeah.
Well, Tsongas is both a messenger and a message. He's a refreshing change from all of the slicked down red tide, excuse me, Sam, television image people. And he also has a message on the economic front
but
that
Sam,
is selling
you
now.
go through you go through any polling data and ask people whether they're liberal or conservative. Many more people identify as conservative than as liberal today in America. And of course, most people say moderate if given the choice.
And more people say they're Democrats, and as Tsongas pointed out, the Republicans have won the White House in the last 5 out of the last 6 contests.
But
another political question I find interesting is that the members of the House who bounced all these rubber checks in the House Bank, which is now gone, are going to have their names made public against, I'm sure, against their fervent wishes. Is that going to defeat some of the members of the House, you think? Cokie, you spend a lot of time up there. What do you think?
The proposal out of the Ethics Committee is that only 19 current members have their names be made public because they are repeated and routine abusers. And the Ethics Committee defined this to mean someone who had overdrawn by more than his next month's paycheck 8 times in 3 years. This does not include somebody who wrote a check for, say, $600,000 and it bounced once. It only includes this very odd category.
They must have spent a lot of time figuring out all
these
they did.
They had to go to, and they don't know who the people are. They did it by code and all this. But what you have is a bunch of young Republicans who were not there long enough to know where the bank was, who are trying to get everybody's name revealed. And I think in the end that's what's likely to happen.
George, what?
The same people who thought that the members needed a private bank still don't get it. They don't get the fact that the message they are now sending to the voters is, we've got the information, but we're going to stonewall. Because if the information gets out, you, the voters, won't treat it responsibly. Now, if that isn't the paradigm of the Washington attitude
George,
that makes people enraged and adds fuel to, guess what I'm about to say, term limits.
Now, but George, I'm not going to buy onto that, but someone said it may have been you, that that's not going to wash.
It's getting to be like Kerry and health.
These names are going to come out. All of them, because everybody
on the going to defeat them when their names come out.
The answer is yes, with some 1 or 2 people.
Because if I'm running against you and you're the incumbent, I'm just going to say, did you bounce checks? Yes or no, Mr. Buttigieg?
And also the Congress has provided a mechanism where that even if they don't vote to reveal the names, the Ethics Committee will provide a letter to every single solitary member of the House about what his or her bank situation is. So all an opponent has to do is stand up and say, where's your letter, Mr. Congressman? And the
people have a right to know.
People have a right to know. And if the congressperson does not provide the letter, then that will be big in the campaign.
It will defeat some of them, David, and it will defeat some of them. And this accumulation of privilege, which the American public has decided they've had enough of, they ought to be defeated.
Well, they're the only people I know who can bounce checks and get away with it. Do you know anybody else?
The United States
Bert
government.
Lance. Who?
The United States government.
I think there's some small town banks that make
we got a few seconds. Does this also apply to free meals in the restaurants? Checks never paid?
The restaurant has all been cleared up, and now there is another management of the restaurant.
Cleared up how?
And you cannot sign for things anymore. You have to have a credit card, just as you would in any other restaurant.
Pass bills.
Congress is threatening to strike back against the president who's beating them up because they say that the White House has 5 full-time florists. We have joined the great issues of the day here in Washington.
You're against flowers,
Indeed. I mean, this is so weighty, I can't stand any more of it. I have to wrap it up.
Clearly smells.
Come back next week. We'll be back with a few words about asking you to pay to have your telephone tapped in a moment.
Word on the street was they were a bad bet. An American institution, 3 days shy of extinction. Only one investment firm, Dean Witter, saw past the problems to the real value of the company. And a rumble was heard round Wall Street as the last American motorcycle company came roaring back to life with a listing on the New York Stock Exchange. From Main Street to Wall Street at Dean Witter.
We measure success one investor at a time.
In these times, when energy security is so important, it's reassuring to know that virtually all the natural gas used in North America comes from North America. Natural gas, because a strong America is an energy-secure America.
Freedom is all that matters. Freedom is everything.
There's a new light shining over Eastern Europe.
The Hungarians are waiting for a very long time.
A light of hope, joy, and most of all, a new light of freedom.
Everything is changing. It's wonderful.
It's a miracle.
I'm so happy.
And in this spirit, GE has entered into a historic partnership with a company called Tungsram, Hungary's leading lighting company.
Freedom is something that you have to work for very hard.
Like a dream. Beautiful dream.
At GE, we're proud to play even a small part in helping the Hungarian people build what promises to be a truly brilliant future.
I'm feeling young again.
If you were on trial for your life, would you want a lawyer who gets paid $2 an hour to defend you? It could happen. Watch Primetime Thursday.
They all grew up in the same neighborhood. Now they all have autistic children. How could it happen? A medical mystery. Watch 2020 Friday.
Finally, one of the U.S. government's favorite pastimes is tapping people's telephones. They tapped mine once. It keeps a fair number of people busy and working and drawing salaries. Most of what they hear is extremely boring. And if they make any notes, they go into the files, in most cases stay there forever, unread. Now, however, wiretapping is no longer so easy. The telephone systems are changing over from copper wires to fiber optics to carry hundreds of calls on one cable. And to separate out an individual call takes complicated technology. The U.S. Department of Justice, which does seem to have too many lawyers, is asking Congress for money for the phone companies to modify their systems so they can still be tapped. And no surprise, it wants to put the cost on your and my phone bill. Only a pack of bureaucrats could think that up. The only thing worse would be, and they may come to this, cutting in on your phone calling saying, "Excuse me, but I'm a government agent tapping your phone and making notes. Would you mind speaking a little more slowly?" For all of us here at ABC News, until next week, thank you.
Once upon a time.
KATU Channel 2.
We have more news ahead here on Channel 2 tonight. Coming up tonight after the movie, Senator Tom Harkin is apparently calling it quits after more losses in yesterday's Democratic primaries. We'll tell you about his plans. Also, tornadoes ripped through North Carolina. We'll show you the damage from one twister and the golf ball-sized hail that came with it. We hope you can join us for Channel 2 News after the movie tonight. Well, the rhythm of African music and the sound of children laughing blended together in Pioneer Place this afternoon. The Northwest African American Ballet came to the mall to share its talents with children. The kids learned native African dances and songs.
1, 2, 3, go! Step, step, stop. Step, step, stop.
Now, the dance steps were easy for the children to pick up. It was just like a game of follow the leader. Organizers hoped the boys and girls had fun and learned a little bit about another culture. That's our report tonight. ABC News is coming right up next. We'll be back tonight after the movie James Bond. We'll see you then. Have a nice evening. Good night.